Hi, my name is Tina and this is Knitting Blooms. You can find show notes for everything I talk about on my blog at www.knittingblooms.com. And if I miss a link, please feel free to contact me on Ravelry as Bloomingknitter, or you can email me at knittingblooms@gmail.com. Come and join the Ravelry group so you can be eligible for all the prize drawings. And be sure to introduce yourself so that I can get to know you also. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter as Bloomingknitter. And don't forget to click the like button on Facebook for Knitting Blooms. Today I'm going to show you how to use beads in your knitting. I'm going to show you 3 different methods. One, by putting the beads directly on the yarn. 2, using a crochet hook to place individual beads as you go. And 3, using super floss to add the beads as you go. Now I'm also going to show you how to get the beads onto your yarn for when you start, if you were to transfer the beads onto your yarn to start. This is not my preferred method of using beads, but your pattern may call for that. So that's what I'm going to show you first, is how to get your beads onto your yarn, a simple, easy way. Now, I have threaded some beads onto the super floss, and the super floss is a dental floss that has kind of like a sharp end, a short end, some spongy, a spongy section, and then another section of regular dental floss. And I have just strung a bunch of beads on here. This is how I would normally string my beads if I'm using my super floss. Now, one thing I have found that's awesome is if you tie a bead in the end of your super floss, your beads will not fall off. So I just tie a knot with a bead in the knot, and my beads stay on my super floss. But like I said, I want to show you how to get your beads on your yarn. Now, you have to put your beads on your yarn before you start knitting, or you will have to break your yarn at some point. And if you have to add more beads after the fact, you will have to break your yarn again. But I'm going to show you how to do it before I start knitting. So all you're going to do is take the end of your yarn, and then take your super floss, and then bend the super floss over your yarn. So you have a short tail on your yarn, and you're just going to bend it over like that, and then you're going to slide your beads down, making sure that you put them through that end on the super floss. So as you slide your beads down, just make sure that they're going over the end of the super floss. Just like that. I'm going to show you how to do that. There are other tools that you can use to get the beads on to your yarn, but some of them are pricey and some of them are not available locally. So if you are in a hurry to get your beads on your yarn, then this is a good option, because super floss you can get at any drugstore. So you're going to make sure that you have them on that end, and then all you're going to do is pull them down and through. And now my beads are on my yarn, ready to work. Okay, so now I have a bit of knitting here that I can show you how to place your beads. The first bead I'm going to place, actually I'm going to place beads randomly across this row, and the first row here that I'm doing, I'm going to show you by using the beads that are already on my yarn. And as I mentioned before, this is not my preferred method of using beads, but your pattern may call for this. And remember that you have to string all your beads ahead of time, and you have to constantly push your beads down on your yarn so that you can knit with them. You can load some of your beads ahead of time and then break your yarn to add more, but again, if you don't like to weave in ends, then that's not a good option. So when it's time to place the bead, when you're using the on the yarn method, all you're going to do is slide the bead up to the needle when you're ready, when the pattern tells you to place your bead, you slide it up right next to the needle where the yarn is attached, and then knit the next stitch. Or do whatever the pattern calls for and your bead is placed. So I'm just going to knit a couple of stitches here. Now your pattern will tell you, you see how this bead is kind of falling to the back? Your pattern will tell you whether you're supposed to place your beads on a right side row or a wrong side row. I just happen to be placing them on the right side row, so this might be a bad example because I probably should place them on the wrong side row for this particular beading method. So again, all you're going to do is slide the next bead up when your pattern tells you to, and then just continue working across your stitches. And slide a bead up. And continue to work across your stitches. Now I'm going to go ahead and see, you see how those beads are popping on the wrong side? So I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of beads alternating on this side so you can see what it looks like on the right hand side. So I'm just going to knit a few stitches here on my edge, and then I'm going to start to purl. And I will place a bead between these other two. So I'll place a bead here. And I'm not sure, like I said, I'm not sure if it'll make a difference. I've only done beads on my knitting twice. So I think it probably always, yeah, it looks like it's always going to fall to the back. But depending on how the pattern is written, it may be because you're doing purl stitches just on either side of where the bead gets placed. And I'm just doing a quick sample piece here. So again, your pattern will go through how and where to place your beads. I'm just trying to give you an idea of how it works when you use it on your yarn. So that is how to place beads while using it on your yarn. And like I said already twice, that's not my preferred method of placing beads, but like I said, if your pattern calls for it and you need to know how to do it, now you do. The next method I'm going to use to place beads is using a small crochet hook. Now this crochet hook is 1.4 millimeters. You may need a smaller needle or smaller crochet hook depending on the size of the beads, but you can see here that I have put the beads right onto my needle. So I'm going to start with that like that, and then I'm going to knit across to where I'm going to place my first bead. And this is my second favorite way to place beads. I'm saving the best for last, which is the super floss. But you're going to knit across to where your bead needs to be placed, and then you're going to take your crochet hook and then take the stitch where the bead is supposed to be, take it off of your needle and hook it on your crochet hook, and then simply slide the bead down onto that stitch, and then put the stitch back on your needle and knit it. Now there is some debate on whether you're supposed to knit the stitch and then knit the stitch and then put the bead on, or put the bead on and then knit the stitch. I just think that as long as you remain consistent, if you're going to put the bead on before you knit the stitch, always put the bead on before you knit the stitch, and you should be fine. So you're just going to take it off, the stitch off, and then place the bead with the crochet hook. And you'll see that this method allows that bead to kind of be on both sides of the knitting because of how the bead is on the stitch. So again, have your bead on your crochet hook, take your stitch off your needle, your knitting needle, slide the bead down onto the stitch, and then put the stitch back on the needle and then knit it, or purl it, or whatever your pattern calls for. I'm going to show you one more here. I have to grab another bead. This is one reason why I don't like using the crochet hook, because I have to continue. You can only stack up about 2 or 3 beads, maybe 4 on your crochet hook, and then you have to keep getting more out of your bin. Take the stitch off the needle, slide the bead on, and sometimes, depending on the size of the bead and the size of the crochet hook, it may get a little stuck, but it's all good. Move those out of the way before I spill them everywhere. And then you just keep knitting. And let me get to the end of the row, and then I'll lay it flat and show you how this looks. You see how those beads are so much more dominant than the beads that we put on using directly from the yarn. Now I'll flip it over and show you this side. And see the beads. These are the beads that we put on directly from the yarn, and these are the beads that we just put on. And you can see that these beads show up on both sides, the ones we just put on, but these beads mostly just sit on the back of the work. But again, your pattern's going to tell you which way is the preferred method for the way that the pattern is written. And the next method, which is my preferred method, is using the super floss. And the reason is because I can load up my super floss and then be knitting with beads for a long time. And it's really easy to load up the super floss. All you have to do is just start picking them up with the sharp, stiff end of your super floss, and then just drop them on down. There are bead spinners that make it easier to get your beads onto something like super floss. I don't have one, and honestly it doesn't take that long to get them on here, and the fact that I can sit down one evening, just load up my super floss, and then probably be able to knit a number of rows without having to re-bead or put more beads on my super floss. I just load it all the way up, and then I'm ready to go. And again, it's so easy. All you're going to do is use that stiff end of the super floss to load up your beads. And placing them is just as easy as using the crochet hook. So I'm going to just knit to where I'm going to place my first bead. And like I said before, I am just randomly placing the beads here, so don't think that it's supposed to be any particular pattern. So I'm going to knit to where I'm going to place my first bead, and I'm going to take my super floss. I'm going to take the end that the stiff end that I just was using to pick up all my beads. I'm going to take that and kind of thread that through that stitch while it's on my needle. And again, same thing goes here. You're either going to put the bead on before you knit the stitch, or you're going to knit the stitch and then put the bead on. But I find that it's easier to put the bead on first and then knit the stitch. So you're going to thread it through your stitch, and then just like you did when you were putting it on your yarn, you're going to fold that end in half, and then bring that seed bead down over the tip of the super floss, and then bring it right onto the stitch, and then put the stitch back on your needle and knit it. So then I'll knit a few more stitches here, and I'll place another bead. So again, you're going to thread the super floss through your stitch. Make sure that you're going through your stitch. Fold the super floss in half, slide a bead down onto the tip of that super floss, making sure that you're catching both edges. Slide it onto the needle or onto the stitch, and then put that stitch back on your needle and then work that stitch. This is my favorite way of doing beads. It's so easy. It doesn't require to have the bead container open all the time, because honestly, with cats and my clumsiness, those beads would be everywhere. And then slide the bead down, making sure to get both edges, and then slide it onto the stitch, and then put it back onto the needle, and then knit it. I'll knit a few more stitches here. We'll place a bead here. Thread the super floss through the stitch, and then slide your bead down onto the super floss, onto your stitch, and then place it back on your needle and work that stitch. One more time for you. Take the end of your super floss, feed it through that needle, that stitch, pop the stitch off the needle just long enough to put that bead right on there, and put the stitch back on your needle and knit it. And there you have it. 3 different methods of adding beads to your knitting. And it'll make it so easy for you, because beads in your knitting are going to be beautiful. They're going to add lots of sparkle to your knitting. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at knittingblooms@gmail.com or on Ravelry as Bloomingknitter. You can also contact me on the blog, and also check the blog for my other tutorials. Thanks for watching. Bye.